I'm the Energy Conservation Coordinator for the town of Winchester, and we have, hopefully everybody has an agenda and a brochure as you came in, and we actually have 3 speakers this morning. I'll speak for shortly, and John ORourke from Good Energy will speak, and we have a surprise guest. Jama is here from Mass Energy Consumers Alliance. So what we'll do is we'll try to cover our material rapidly and then have questions and answers at the end of our presentations. And we're happy to take questions and answers until everybody has all the answers that they need. And we're really fortunate that WinCam is here, and WinCam will film this so that we can play it again for people who weren't able to make it today. So because of that, if you have a question, if you can please speak up, and then we'll repeat the question back so everybody can hear what's being asked and answered. So first of all, thank you very much. I'm so glad to see you. I wanted to cover, because I'm a town employee, why are we here? How did this even get started? What's going on? So there's a gentleman in the front row, Dave Judelson, in fall of 2015, town meeting passed unanimously in fall of 2015, so almost 2 years ago, a warrant to aggregate electricity, and that was to look into aggregation. Would it make sense? Why would we do this? To take a look and study it and see if there's any benefit for the town of Winchester. So that led us into this process. Subsequently, the next thing that happened is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Has anybody heard of them? They work on behalf of about 100 municipalities in the greater Boston area. Other towns were thinking the same thing we were thinking. Melrose actually did this a year and a half ago. They had aggregation. There are, I think, 70 different communities that have done electricity aggregation. So the MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, put out an RFP, a request for proposal, to find the best agent or broker to look into aggregation on behalf of all those municipalities. And a company called Good Energy won that RFP. So John ORourke is here from Good Energy, and they then helped us put together a plan, and the plan was approved unanimously by the Board of Selectmen. We are lucky to have Mike Betancourt, one of our selectmen, is here today. So that plan was then put out for public comment last summer. So every resident had 8 weeks to comment on it. It was on the website, and it was also boring and dense and long, and nobody really wanted to read it. So we all had a chance to look at it, and then it was passed again by the Board of Selectmen unanimously, so that's twice. And then it went to the Department of Public Utilities. So we actually had a hearing. It was like a court hearing. There was, stage and, people up there like judges and everything. And so that's when a lot of different communities are actually doing this simultaneously. So all the Eversource communities were there at the same time. So I was in that room along with Arlington, Somerville, Sudbury, and Brookline, thank you. So all of those towns are doing this, or cities, are doing this at the same time that we're doing this. So their residents have the same questions, their residents have the same ugly letter to look at, that letter that came out that's really hard to read. So the Department of Public Utilities actually drafted that letter. So it went into the sausage grinder last September, and it came out in May of this year. And they said, this is the letter that you need to send your residents. And we said, can't we change the letter? That's really hard to read. And they said, no, you can't change the letter. The letter is the letter. So we sent you a postcard saying WinPower, like, here it comes, get ready for the letter. And so now we're trying to have events like this to try to answer your questions and demystify all the different elements that are in that letter. So then when that came out of the Department of Public Utilities, we then could go with our friends Good Energy and go out to bid. So we had a competitive bid process for our electricity price for the town of Winchester, residents and small businesses, anybody who is on Eversource Basic Service. So Eversource Basic Service is kind of the default. The calls that we all get at dinner time, that, I don't know about you, but I try really hard not to answer them because it's really a pain in the neck. And they say, oh, we'll save you money on your electricity. A lot of those contracts are not great. If you sign up for those contracts, they might give you a low rate at the beginning, and then the rate can go up and up. And our friends in Melrose found that particularly seniors had been preyed upon by these. So that's one of the reasons that we're doing this. The plan that you see here, WinPower, you can opt out today, you can opt out in a year, you can opt out in 6 months, you can get out anytime you want. But the people that call you for those for-profit companies who are asking you to join their plan because you'll save money in the short run, usually those contracts are very binding and you would have to pay a big premium to get out of those contracts. So that's one of the reasons that we think this is a benefit for Winchester residents, because if you do enter the plan, you can opt out any time you want. So that's one win. So we get the plan back from DPU, we get bids, Good Energy runs a bid process for us. We got 4 bids out for a variety of lengths of time, and we picked the best bid that would benefit the residents of Winchester the best way. And why is that a benefit compared to Eversource? Why wouldn't we just stick with Eversource? Eversource goes out to bid for electricity every 6 months. So the maximum amount of time that you know what your bill is going to be is 6 months. So we don't know what our bill will be starting next January. The rate that we just got from Eversource that's on that letter that you have from the Department of Public Utilities and from Good Energy and from the town, that rate is good for 6 months. The rate that we got for WinPower is good for 30 months. So we have 2.5 years of knowing exactly what that number is going to be. So we think that's the second win. It's predictable. We know what it is, we're transparent, and we can tell you exactly where you are. And you can still opt out anytime. So Eversource, the whole Eversource thing, we like Eversource. They take good care of us. The only thing that would change on your bill is the source of your electricity. You still would be billed by Eversource. They still own the wires, the poles. If you have a problem with your service, you still call Eversource. Nothing changes. They still have to take good care of us. They are a utility, that's what they do. They provide supply as another service, but it is not mandatory that you get your supply from Eversource. So people like the town, for example, hasn't had Eversource as our supply for a long time because we know we can get better rates from other bidders. The hospital has probably not had Eversource for their supply ever. I would imagine that Mr. Cummings probably has not had Eversource for his supply for a really long time. Anybody that has a big amount of use, you can get a better rate by going out for a competitive bid. So in essence, that's what we've done. We said, let's get a group purchase together. Let's take all these little accounts and come together as a group and see if we can get a better rate for us. So that's what we're doing here, and Good Energy has helped us. So we had the lowest bid of those 4 bids, and that's what WinPower is. So we're creating this program to hopefully help the town of Winchester, A, get less calls at dinner time, B, have a better rate, C, have predictability. So those are 3 wins right there. So I'll let John, oh, and there's another element which is green, but we'll get to that. So I'll let, John ORourke from Good Energy take it from here, and then we'll have Jana talk, and then we'll take a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. My name is John ORourke. Company name is Good Energy. I'm the Director of Marketing Northeast. And essentially what we did, and thank you for being here this morning, we helped the town of Winchester with an aggregation program. As Susan mentioned, this has gone through a very rigorous and comprehensive approval process, not only with your Board of Selectmen, but with the Department of Public Utilities. And the letter you received that Susan referred to, it is a complex letter because the Department of Public Utilities wants to make sure that all the important information is in that letter. That's why it's so long and complicated. At one time, this was a much simpler letter, but again, the department wants to make sure that you have all the information you need to make the decision you need to make. Can we get the next slide, please? The reason for aggregation is essentially to get better rates for residents. Back in 1997, there was a law passed in Massachusetts. It's called the Municipal Aggregation Law. It was the first law in the country that would allow towns to aggregate the electricity loads of their residents and businesses and to go out for a better price through a competitive bid. All the laws that have been passed since the Massachusetts law was passed have been modeled on the Massachusetts law. And essentially the author of that law here in Massachusetts is Stan Rosenberg, who is now our Senate president. And essentially, the objectives, as Susan put them, can I get the next slide? Okay. Longer term price stability. As she mentioned, this program is for 30 months. The Eversource rates change every 6 months, and that's mandated by law, so they have no choice in that. Also, they have to go out at very specific times, which is a kind of a disadvantage. Whereas when you go out like we do, we can go out at more strategic times when energy rates are lower and get better rates than Eversource can get in most cases. You have lower electricity prices over the term of the contract. You have more renewable energy options. And as you may know, Winchester has been at the forefront, one of those municipalities at the forefront of creating more renewable energy options for their residents to lower the carbon footprint of the town and to basically be consistent with the state objectives for having more renewable energy in the mix that you're getting in your electricity. The other benefits, you can opt out of this program at any time without penalty or termination fees. You continue to get a single bill from Eversource. There's just one slight change on the bill, and that's the name of the supplier. Everything else stays the same. Your service comes through Eversource. They continue to maintain the infrastructure and the wiring. The only difference on your bill is the name of the supplier. And again, this kind of a program discourages unscrupulous marketers from making phone calls. You may have received phone calls. You may have received mailings with all kinds of promises. There are some legitimate programs out there, but some of the programs are essentially just trying to get you into a situation at a lower rate and then bump up the rates after a short period of time. This is what the Eversource rates have looked like over about the last 10 years. Those are adjustments every 6 months. You'll notice the volatility, and again, that's caused because they can only go out to bid at 2 specific times of the year. So it doesn't give basic service customers of Eversource a lot of comfort in terms of the rates they can get for you. And this is the new Eversource bill. You probably just started getting this recently. The only change on this bill is on the second page. This is the name of the supplier. Everything else remains the same. There was a handout in the back that looked like one of these. This was created by Carol Starrett. She's the president of Sustainable Winchester. And essentially, she explained this very well in one chart and what you have to do. Essentially, with WinPower, if you want to stay with the standard product that's being offered, which is 5% more renewable energy at a rate of 10.898 per kilowatt hour, and that's for 30 months, you don't have to take any action. You'll automatically be put into that part of the program. If you wanted to get 100% renewable energy, you'd go for the Win 100 option. That is more expensive at 13,558, and to get into that, you would call Dynergy at that number. There's also an option for Win Basic, which means there's no more additional energy than is required by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which right now is actually 12% of the electricity you get is generated from renewable sources. That's the law in Massachusetts. It's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard. This year, for 2017, it's 12%. That will continue to go up 1% a year until 2020. At that point, it may be there may be a law passed that will require more of that in the basic service mix, more renewable energy. And then, of course, if for some reason you want to stay with Eversource, you can just mail in the opt-out card that was in the letter, and they're slightly higher. But again, the Eversource rate is going to change in January, and we expect it to be higher than that 10,759 that they have right now. This is my contact information. If for some reason there's no answer to your question today, feel free to call me at any time or email me, and I'll answer your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to our renewable energy expert from Mass Energy. We get our renewable energy through renewable energy certificates, which are sourced by Mass Energy, and essentially they're the recognized leaders in the Commonwealth in what's called Massachusetts Class 1 Renewable Energy Credits, RECs. And the reason for that is we know where the energy is coming from, it's documented, and it's from Massachusetts renewable energy projects. And I'm not going to talk any more about that now. I'm going to let Jamin do that.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaima, and I work at Mass Energy. And like John mentioned, I'm going to take you through why Mass Energy has been invited to join WinPower and what a difference we're going to make for Winchester in their electricity. So first of all, who is Mass Energy? We are a non-profit organization. We were founded in 1982. And our business plan is kind of what Winchester is doing with their electricity. We're a buyer's program. So we have a buyer's program for green electricity, and we even got started before the state even knew what the renewable energy certificates were. We also have a discount program for heating oil. For those folks who use heating oil, we have a program you can get discounted low prices with full service dealers through us. And then we also provide options to put in solar in your home and also some electric vehicle discounts. And last but not least, we do some advocacy in the State House to make sure that our State House has to know what renewable energy initiatives they should really support. Okay, so we're talking a lot about renewable energy certificates. So what are those? So basically, with all the electricity that gets generated, all gets put directly onto the electric grid. So once that electricity gets put into the grid, we really don't know where that electricity is coming from. Right? We have power plants that put electricity into the grid. We have some electricity that comes from natural gas, and then we have some electricity that comes from renewable sources. So in order for us to know what the electricity is coming from renewable sources, we have created what is called a Renewable Energy Certificate, or a REC, and that way we can tag that renewable energy. And the way that it's done is 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated, and that's 1,000 kilowatt hours, generates one REC, so one certificate. And that lets you know where the source is coming from. It's going to let you know what resource type, if it's going to be wind or hydro or solar. It's going to tell you what month in particular it was generated. So it tells you all of that. So here in Massachusetts, we really want to know where our electricity is coming from. So we pay really close attention of what that rec is telling us. And we want to make sure that we use the recs that really mean the most to our electricity. So you can see there a diagram up in the presentation. So the wind turbine in this case puts a megawatt hour into the grid that then the utility gives to your home, but we really don't know what that electron is doing. So in order to be able to make sure that rec is tagged in the system, right, in a computer, we get it electronically, and then we make sure that that rec is assigned to whoever is buying that rec, right? So we have, in order to be able to claim it, we have to buy it. So that's where we know that we can claim it ourselves. So we've been talking about the Renewable Portfolio Standard. So this is a law in Massachusetts, and thankfully a lot of states in the United States have this too. But this is demanding of all the utilities and also competitive suppliers that their whole electricity load is coming from renewable sources. In Massachusetts, we started back in 2003, and like John mentioned, now it's going up 1% every year. Right now we're at 12%. So if this keeps going on, we will get 100% of our electricity by 2105. It's really far away. So one of the things that we're working on in Mass Energy is making sure that we increase that renewable portfolio standard, because we don't think it's fast enough. We want more renewable energy on the grid now. But when we're talking about renewable portfolio standard, what are the resources that we are supporting? We're talking about solar, wind, small hydro, digester gas, or geothermal. So here in Massachusetts, we talk about Massachusetts Class 1 RECs, and those are the ones that we're talking about. They're new technologies. Out of all those resources that I mentioned, they were built after 1997. And why these resources? Because they have the most impact on the environment. They have very little to no greenhouse gas emissions. So we know that they're really making an impact into our environment and our electricity. So one thing that is definitely important to know is that not all RECs are created equal. So there's some places in the world, specifically like for example Texas, that they're very suitable for renewable energy. For example, Texas is very flat, so we know that wind there is pretty steady. So there are natural conditions that are favorable to wind. So to build wind turbines in Texas is really cheap. So they do that a lot. Even if the state does not mandate that their electricity comes from wind power, they build a lot because they don't need the extra help. Also, Texas is really sunny almost all the time, not like today. They get a lot of solar, so they also have solar panels. We heard Arizona too has a lot of solar panels. But here in New England, we don't have those natural conditions. So the projects here need a little bit of an extra help to be able to be built. So what we see here in the blue, in those 3 projects, is what those projects are getting just for their electricity, right? When they sell the electricity to you, that's the revenue that they're getting. And what we see in the green is the revenue that they're getting by selling the RECs, right? Because people like you and me, we want to make sure that some of our electricity comes from renewable energy, so we buy the RECs. So we see an old New England hydro project or a non-New England wind project, they don't need that much revenue from the RECs, right? Because they already got financed, they know they're making money compared to the red, which is their cost of building those projects. But if we look at a New England wind project, for example, their costs are higher than what they're getting paid for their electricity. So they need that extra incentive that then comes from the RECs that we're selling. So it's very important to us to make sure that when we are buying renewable energy here in New England, that we're focusing on renewable energy here in New England and not out of state. New England has its own grid, right? So all 6 New England states are in the grid. So we want to make sure that we're focusing here in New England. And like I mentioned, we are trying to get the renewable portfolio standard higher. We think that, actually we don't think that. We had a study, one of our partner organizations, Synapse Energy, did a study where if we increase the renewable portfolio standard by 2 or 3% every year, it will make a bigger impact. And we will get to 100% renewable much faster and also in a timely way. so that we don't get ahead of ourselves, but still, we can make that possible very soon. So right now, unfortunately, we're not there yet at 2 or 3%, but one of the ways that we can help renewable energy keep going is by demanding voluntarily that all of our sources come from renewable energy. So that's what Mass Energy has been doing for the past 20 years or so in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and in Rhode Island. We do business in both states, and here is a map of our local resources. So if you are a member of Mass Energy, or in Rhode Island we're People's Power and Light, this is where your electricity is coming from. We're buying the renewable energy certificates from all of these sources right here. And you can see they're local facilities. You can see Hull, we can see it in Harvard sometimes, Situate. We have a new project in Plymouth, and we have solar systems all over the state. So you can see how these projects are making a difference in our backyard. So when the Massachusetts Area Planning Council decided, let's go above and beyond, let's give more renewable energy in the basic option, they came to us to ask for that renewable energy extra, the additional that we're going to provide in your electricity, because we can provide you these resources that are local. So all the towns went for it, all the towns that we mentioned, Somerville, Brookline, Arlington, Sudbury, Winchester, and we already have Dedham and Melrose who already have it already in place. Their additional 5%, and if they're going above and beyond to the 100%, is coming from these resources. Thankfully, because obviously these are big towns and there's a lot of electricity that's coming in, over the next couple of months, we're going to see this map that is going to grow. We're talking to a lot more projects in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and the rest of New England to make sure that we have enough power to feed you guys the electricity. So there is enough power, we just have to demand it. And that's what we're doing with WinPower. And you saw our map, we're really focused with wind, and that's because wind power is the most affordable zero emission available out there, other than energy efficiency. So it's very important that we keep focusing on that because we can get it in a cheap way and it's also zero emissions. So it's great to have in our portfolio. And just a fun fact, our biggest customer is actually Mass Audubon. Some people say like, oh, what about birds and what about negative impacts of the sound of the turbines? Mass Audubon did a study, but when Cape Wind was around, and they found out that renewable energy actually is better for the birds. So ever since then, they're our biggest customer. They buy all of their electricity that they do not generate themselves from their own solar panels. They buy through us, and it's all wind power. So that's pretty neat. So like I mentioned, there are the same options that John provided before. So in your automatic standard option, that 5% is going to come through all those resources that I showed you. We have a couple more coming up online. If you opt into the 100%, we will match 100% of what you use in your electricity with renewable energy. And basically how it happens is the new competitive supplier will tell us on a quarterly basis, Winchester used this amount of electricity, can you please provide it with renewable energy? And we do that. So please remember, if you are going to opt into the 100%, you do have to mail in the card or let Dynergy know, but you're automatically enrolled into WinPower, which has 5% above the RPS. So you're already doing great service to your to the state. In WinPower Basic and Eversource is just a 12% RPS only that goes up 1% every year. The neat thing is that when you're doing the 5% extra, even next year, for example, when you're still doing it, then it will be 18%, because you combine the 13% that basic service and the competitive supplier will be doing, plus our additional 5%. So that's all I have. So hopefully you guys will keep the 5% option renewable, and if you want to go above and beyond, definitely encourage you to do 100% renewable. We will definitely match that for you with local resources that we talked about. And if you have any questions about our program, where the resources are coming from or anything, feel free to give us a call. That's our phone number and my email. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Jema and John. And we'll take some questions now. I do want to mention one other fact that I've picked up in the last few days that I love, and that is the 5%, if we each do our 5% adder, All of us together, just in Winchester, it equals the output from that big, huge wind turbine in Somerville that you see when you drive into Boston. So all of us together, it's only $1 a month more, and that's what it adds up to, is one whole turbine. So then if you think of Arlington and Somerville and Brookline and Sudbury, and other communities are looking at doing it in the future. So it really does help us add up by pooling our resources to bring clean, green energy online. We're not going to be fracking. We're not going to be bringing oil. There are no oil derricks that are going to pop up in Massachusetts. We are an energy-dependent state. And one other thing I want to mention, historically, Massachusetts has one of the top 5 energy rates in the country. Hawaii is always number 1, but we're usually around 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we pay a lot compared to other states, and that's because we are at the end of the line. That oil is coming from Texas, or that natural gas is coming from Ohio and Pennsylvania. So we pay a ton, and it's mostly in transportation. So the more we can build wind power here, or solar, or hydro in Massachusetts, we're keeping the money in our economy. We're creating jobs for our next generation. And that means that we need to import less energy. So it really is healthy for our economy to try to build in that extra 5% that then over time builds and builds, so we have our own energy economy instead of being dependent on all this input from other places. Anyway, thank you for listening. Any questions? Yes?
John showed a chart where the prices of electricity have fluctuated. They've gone down as well as gone up. And you kind of implied it's only going to go up. If it does go down, will there be an adjustment made in this 30-month contract that we have, or will we be stuck with a higher rate?
Great question. So the question is, John showed a chart that has Eversource rates going up and down, and what happens if the rate goes down? That's a great question. So there's 2 answers to that. Number 1, the rate always goes up in winter relative to summer. So since we're entering at a summer rate, we're pretty confident that winter is going to be higher. And number 2, ISO New England, the grid, goes out to bid 3 years in advance for peak rate power. And peak rate power is one of those many lines on your bill, but we know that that is going through the roof for the next 12 months, and then it gets even higher. It doubles again the 12 months after that. So that's not a guarantee that it will go up, but it is a very good indicator that for the next 24 months, we're going to have high rates. So knowing that, as the town, my commitment to you is that we will be completely transparent. So we're going to send you in the water bills. Once we know what the Eversource rate is, we'll let you know online on the town website. We can put it in the water bills. We'll get it out to you however we can so that you can make a decision. So if you want to opt out in 6 or 12 or 18 months, but right now we just have no way of knowing what those rates are going to be from Eversource. So we will provide you that information so you can opt out.
But what I'm also asking, will the wind power rate be adjusted if the rates do go
No,
down?
we are in a 30-month contract, so it stays flat and predictable, and we think it's a good price. That's the best advice that we have from Good Energy, that we have a good price, but we are locked in for 30 months. But John pointed out that we have the flexibility with Good Energy to go out to bid at our time of choosing. So if we see an advantageous time between month 24 and month 30, then we'll go out and get another bid so that hopefully we can get the best price possible for the following period of time. And of course, all that we will also publicize. Yes?
Yeah, we comment on commercial rates. I'm concerned about this building. I run a building. We run 5 to 8,000 kilowatt kWh a month here. How are the rates for commercial going to be affected by this program?
John, can you take that?
This is a Winchester town building, correct?
No.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's
Okay.
5%.
Okay, again, if you're probably going out for a contract on your own right now.
We're just straight with Eversource.
You're straight with Eversource.
We did this a few years ago, got burned badly, so we're very reluctant to play this game again.
Okay. If you're on the basic rate with Eversource, you've gotten a letter, and you can come into this program if you want. Or because of the fact that you have a high usage, you might want to try to go out for a competitive bid again. Okay, separately.
Okay. But the rates here are residential rates, not commercial rates.
That's correct.
If I wanted to understand how wind power would work on a commercial rate, can I get some answers to that question?
This is essentially a residential program, so these are residential rates. They're non-commercial rates. Your commercial rates tend to be a little lower because the load profile is different, and the load shape is different, so they tend to be a little bit lower. So you'd be more advantageous for you to go out to bid on your own.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to mention, so I mentioned Melrose and Dedham did this last year, and actually their summer rates for this year, they're a little bit higher than what the summer Eversource basic rate is. So they actually, like we mentioned, like they're paying a little bit more, but throughout the length of the contract, they're saving money. Just because in the winter, their rates are so much lower than basic service, all the people in the town of Melrose and Dedham, not everyone, obviously, but most people have decided to wait it out to have the length of the contract in, because throughout the 30 months, you will see those savings. So in the summer, you might pay a little bit more here and there, maybe, we don't know yet, but in the winter, you might see those big savings that we're talking about, and you're still doing that additional renewable energy that you're not going to see with Eversource. So they see the difference of staying within the program through the length of the contract. Even if 6 months, you might pay a tenth of a penny or a little bit more here and there.
You said we can opt out, and suppose we opt out, and then later on, we think, oh, we made a mistake, we want to opt back in. Is that possible?
That's up to Good Energy.
The supplier Dynergy, okay, we work with them all over the country. They do more aggregation programs than any other electricity company in the country. They have a great reputation, and because it's our aggregation, you will probably be able to opt back in if you opt out.
Yeah. Let's say I do the 100%. How do I know if I get 100% wind power?
The question is, if you opt for 100% renewable, how do you know that it's 100% renewable? So fortunately, we have our renewable energy expert here, Jayma.
Yeah, so Mass Energy is the one who will be purchasing the renewable energy credits on your behalf. So we send those directly to Dynergy in the computer, so everything is tracked. All that transaction is tracked. So once those recs will come to us, we will tag them as Winchester 100%, and we will send them to the supplier, and they can't use them anymore because we retire them. We make sure they're offline, those have been used, and then they're also being monitored by Good Energy and us. So a lot of different entities are making sure that those recs that we send to Dynergy, we tag them as 100%, and they know that those are already used, and they can't use them anymore.
So their computer will tell that that house is getting 100%.
So Dynergy will tell us, Winchester used this much electricity.
I mean, my house.
So it's an aggregation, so all the data comes in as the whole town. So we get the numbers for the whole town. We don't get that level of detail, but I'm sure Good Energy and Dynergy do have that amount. But because we're supplying the aggregation, we will get the whole aggregation. It doesn't go down to the individual level.
So how is energy doing that?
Because they know your electric account numbers. They have all that information. Yes?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments, also questions. The gentleman, when you said that Dynergy is one of the most reputable company in the United States, did I hear you say that 2 years ago?
I said they are one of the largest energy companies in the United States.
I want to repeat. Dynergy was sued by the SEC back in 2002. They were required to pay $300 million back to their consumers because they had manipulated the books in their favor. So that was a big fine, and about half of their officers, some of them are still in jail. So that's not a very, they went bankrupt in 2016, and their stock is now at $8 per share.
Dynergy is one of the largest energy companies in the country, and I'm sure that some of their divisions may have had trouble. I think that incident was in Texas you're referring to, 15 years ago. Okay, we have used Dynergy in our aggregations in Illinois and here in Massachusetts and in New Jersey. We've never had a problem with Dynergy. We are the national leader in this project. We wouldn't bring on anyone, okay, who wasn't going to fulfill our requirements in our aggregations.
But Dynegy went bankrupt in 2016. That's what information I got from the web.
We're working with Dynegy all over the country, and we have no problem with Dynegy.
I'm asking you, according to the information I have.
I don't know where you got your information
On the
from.
web. Well, so you say for sure that Dynegy didn't go bankrupt in 2016.
What I'm saying to you is our experience with Dynegy has always been good. Whether another division of their company has had a problem, I don't know. Our experience with Dynegy has been positive.
You didn't answer my question, sir. Dynegy went bankrupt in 2016.
I don't know anything about Dynegy going bankrupt in 2016.
Well, that's not what the information is given. The stock right now is $8.
Can't go nowhere.
The only thing I can tell you is our experience with Dynegy has been positive.
Okay, and my other question is a technical question about opting out. Most of us here, I'm sure, are on Medicare. And Medicare, we have the Medicare D, which is the pharmacy, the medication. You have a supplier of that pharmacy. If you want to change, every year you have a right to change. You have to write the new company you want to work with and say, I want to be with you. You propose something opposite. You say, if you don't do anything with Eversource, automatically you're going to come with us. That you completely, you don't take into account a person like
agree with
myself,
this.
which, who, for example, threw away the letter because I'm not interested in changing from Eversource after consideration, and then I realized that if I don't do anything, I'm going to go with you guys.
Okay. The question was a problem with the opt-out provision, basically?
That's
Okay. The way the law is written, it's an opt-out program, okay? We're following what the law says. So that's the reason why it's an opt-out.
What law is that?
It's under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 164, Section 134A.
Just to clarify, back in 1997, Massachusetts was the first state to pass an aggregation law. Aggregation to me sounds like a dense term. It basically means group purchase. So the idea was, these utilities, they have a total monopoly. We need to give people a chance to do something else. Consumers should be able to have a choice in this matter. So that's why we're saying that this is an electricity choice. We were the first state to pass it, and the way the bill was written, it's an opt-out. So if a community decides to take on aggregation, you have to opt out. That's the law. And that's part of why this letter is so difficult to read. So unfortunately, it does make it seem like a railroading, but that's just the way the law is written. So we're just trying to be as transparent as possible and let you know why we think there's actually some benefits to this. Yes, in the back.
What if the demand for the RECs outstrip the supply? What happens?
So I'll let Jaima take this in just a second, but for starters, what we're excited about, Eversource, when they do RECs, they're just going to buy the lowest price, so it might not be in Massachusetts. So because we're working with Mass Energy, we're creating infrastructure here in the Commonwealth and in Rhode Island, which is a big win. And because it's a 30-month program and not a 6-month time horizon, it allows Mass Energy to say to, I don't know if you noticed on the map, there are quite a number of small towns that are able to build big projects. It allows them to sign long-term contracts to get some of these projects off the ground in Ipswich and Plymouth and Situate. We don't have the wind for it, but imagine 21,000 people trying to come together to build a multi-million-dollar turbine. We wouldn't be able to do it. So it's those projects, it's Mass Energy that enables those projects to happen. So they've got projects in the pipeline now, and this will allow them to really expand the number of projects that they do going forward. And I think Winchester's at the leading edge on this. So they're seeing us come down the pipeline, and then hopefully other communities, I think, are coming in down the pipeline next year, and those communities will aggregate. So over time, it will allow Mass Energy to create lots of contracts with lots of municipalities to build more turbines, put more solar panels out there, so forth. But I'll let Gemma take the specifics.
Yeah, no, you basically answered everything. But rest assured, there is enough renewable energy in New England to cover your needs. We are going to come back to you in 6 months or maybe a year from now, and we will show you that same map that I showed you is going to basically blow up. We have a lot of different facilities across New England that we're talking to, so that we can get a lot of renewable energy for your town. So you will see those resources come in. And like Susan mentioned, we are in talks with projects that need that extra financing, that extra help to get off the ground. We are talking to them, and we are really confident that we will be able to, in a couple of years, you'll be seeing more in Massachusetts and closer to you. That's our goal, to make sure that we are able to secure enough financing for projects next to you. So there is enough right now, but we want more, and we'll make sure that that happens with your program.
Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time looking at the chart. You put it up there for a reason. And it shows what the options are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like you can get more for your money as you go down or up on it. Because of the numbers that you look on the rate, I assume that's what you're going to do. You have to pay more.
So the WinPower
And
Basic
WinPower
is
just
essentially
as good as anybody else.
just slightly less expensive than the Eversource Basic, but that rate is locked in for 30 months. So the real win will come when the winter rate goes up significantly. We don't know how much. They go out to bid in November sometime. And then our rate will stay the same for 30 months. So we are pretty confident that that 30-month stability will beat the gyrations over time that we'll see from the Eversource Basic rate. Does that make sense?
Well, a little bit, I guess, but I don't mean that disrespectfully. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to figure out if we have the best resource from Eversource for all of us, and then we put a chart up like this, and we put wind power 5%, I get everything for 5%.
No, the 5% is the additional renewable energy. It's the green energy adder. So it costs slightly more. It's about $1 more per month for the average household in Winchester.
And wind power 100 means what?
100% renewable. So you would get 100% of your power
But
from
still-
renewable
The
resources.
same waiting period is there. You said so many, what did you say we had to wait to find out, to get, if anybody wants to get into it? Can we
So
say-
the time period, the deadline for this is June 26th. The opt-out period ends. So all that means is we're counting down to, remember we mentioned Eversource goes out to bid every 6 months. So the end of Eversource's winter rate is with July 6th and 7th is the date where they take a meter read. It's the meter read date for Winchester. So that's why we're backing it up. June 26th is our deadline, because that any accounts that are going to change have to change on July 6th and 7th. So that's when all the elves get busy with computers and put all the information in. So then starting July 6th and 7th, that's sort of the line in the sand, and all your usage after July 6th and 7th will fall into one of those categories. That's when those rates come in. So your bill that you receive in August, reflecting that July usage, will reflect whichever option you choose. So it's all options. You get to choose. It's all up to you. It's all transparent.
I'd like to
Yes.
make a correction. You mentioned that the rates go up in the wintertime. I looked at my January bill, and it was 8+ cents a kilowatt hour. So my winter rate was not higher, it was lower.
So we need to look forward. Your winter rate was higher than your previous summer rate. Okay? The summer rate we're entering now, I think I mentioned we're in a peak period. ISO New England goes out to bid on behalf of all of New England for what's called peak power. So there are power stations that don't turn on except for the highest use few afternoons in the summer. And those power stations have to be on call 24/7, 365 days a year, but they're only used a few times a year. But those power plants, it's an auction, and ISO New England is paying enormous rates. So we're entering the year where it's this huge spike for that peak power. And unfortunately, Winchester, I told you Massachusetts is in one of the highest rate states. Winchester is in one of the highest rate portions of Massachusetts. We're in what's called NEMA. And NEMA has the highest peak rate, so we know there's no way it's going to go, next winter is going to be much higher than last winter, okay? And the following winter is probably going to be higher than that because we know those peak rates have doubled and doubled again. Now, maybe there won't be any effect from those peak rates on the base rates. We don't know until Eversource goes out to bid. We think it's an indication that it's going to go way up. But that's the best information we have. So we're giving you the best deal that we can come up with. Yes? Yes?
Hypothetical question, sort of based on what this gentleman suggested. If Dynergy as an entire company were to go poof, what then happens with our contract and our supply? If they go poof at, I don't know, month 12.
So the question is, if Dynergy disappears, what happens at that stage? I'll let John answer that, but let me just share, Eversource doesn't generate electricity. They also go out to bid, and they just aren't telling you who they've gotten their electricity from. So everybody goes out to bid. They're getting the same kind of bids. But let me get John to answer that.
Yeah, nothing will happen to your electricity supply if Dynergy disappeared tomorrow, okay? And you'll still be at the same rate. There's both an operational and a financial end to you receiving your electricity. We're dealing here with the financial end. Operationally, all your electricity comes through the grid through ISO New England. Operationally, you would continue to get electricity if Dynergy disappeared tomorrow, okay? So there's no worries about that.
Yes?
Question, could you, John ORourke, could you go back to the bar graph that you had shown earlier in your presentation and superimpose on it the 10, 8, 9, 4 rate? Because there appeared to be a great deal of fluctuation in those rates in the past. And I think it would probably alleviate a lot of the concern if we could show the variation, positive and negative, from the price that you quoted.
You want to know where the rates are on this chart?
Right.
Okay. Right now, we've got, we're at the basic rate or the standard rate for Winchester would be 10.89, and right now the Eversource rate is 10.759. So it's slightly above, okay, the rate for Eversource right now. What's going to happen at their next adjustment is that rate is going to kick up. So our rate stays the same for 30 months. You're going to see the Eversource rate go up in the next winter cycle. It may be slightly below our rate for the summer cycle, but then again, you're going to see it kick up again for their next winter cycle. So through the 30 months of this program, you're going to see savings, cumulative savings at the end of this program.
But if that graph, and I'm trying to read it from here, if that graph shows 30 months, and in the center of the bars, they appear to be significantly lower, then my question is, it appears as though there's quite a variation from the average in what you're showing on that graph.
If there was a situation where the Eversource rate got way below our rate, you could opt out of the program. You always have a choice to do that without penalty. We're confident that over the contract length that we've gotten on this bid, that you will save money. Aside from that, you'll have stability and you have more green energy options.
But your average is also showing that you're using 768 kilowatt hours. So someone that's using less than that would not have the savings that you're showing in this chart.
Everybody will have those savings.
I have a question that this is not a selling chart. Could you read the lowest the kilowatt hour cost on the lowest one and the highest one?
It's impossible to read that.
You can't read that. That's old people who wear glasses. Yeah, what's that at the top of that bar? What's that number?
December from 2012.
Yeah, that's 6.7 cents,
Two.
And the highest,
and that's 15 cents.
Thank you.
So this is the Eversource basic rate historically, okay? So I don't know if you remember that winter, but everybody went, oh my gosh, how did this happen? It went up 5 cents, it went up 50%, you know? So this is the kind of thing, Eversource rate is completely unpredictable. We do not know what's gonna happen. Sorry.
I will add something. So this is a historical graph, but just to compare, Melrose and Dedham went out to bid for 2016 and 2017. When they got their bid, over here, they got it at 9 cents, right? So they're saving in the summer. So this is 10 cents that they were paying for basic, but they got theirs at 9 cents. So when they got to the winter, they still are at 9 cents. Actually, it was 9.6. And you can see Eversource Basic was 10.8, so they're still saving. But come last summer, they were not saving anymore. So that's here. This was our biggest worry when we were saving them. We thought that a lot of people would opt out because the savings were not there anymore, even though they had seen the savings. But what happened? This happened then. They're still at 9.6, and they saw their savings yet again. So what we're saying is, it's not guaranteed that every single time that the aggregation is going to happen, that every single 6 months you're going to save money. But throughout the length of the contract, for example, like Melrose and Dedham, when they went out to bid, got a lower bid because at that time the prices were lower, they were able to save throughout the length of the contract. Now they're going out to bid also for 2018 and on, and they had similar bids to what you've got. They don't know what's coming, but they saw that throughout the length of the contracts, they saw savings.
Can you just show us where 10.8 is on that chart?
It's right here, so that's 10.8.
Yes,
Just
in
for,
the back.
just for comparison, what is the average Winchester household monthly bill right now? You know, you've indicated this will be $1 more or $21 more for the min 100. What is the number that's relative to?
I can't do that math off the top of my head. Kathy can probably do it faster than I can. But another thing to bear in mind, this is just the supply line on your bill. So this tends to be about half of your bill. The other half of your bill is all Eversource charges for transmission, transition, demand, peak load, so forth, distribution. So all of this is just about one line on your bill. I don't know if you remember when John had that slide and it showed a circle around. This is just the supply.
I understand. I just was curious, relative to the total amount, what's an additional $21?
It's usually roughly half of the bill, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So 10.8 cents times 768 is the...
Okay, it's about half.
Yeah, and the other, it's about $1. The additional, the 5% renewable adder means about $1 more per month. So for me, we ran Solarize Mass back in 2011, and we had over 600 residents express interest in getting solar on their roofs. But Peter Wild can tell you we have 85% tree cover. So guess what? 85% of the 615 residents couldn't get solar. So if you were interested in solar and you couldn't get it, the 100% renewable option is like getting solar, but keeping your trees in your shade. So that 5% additional or the 100% renewable options are really, really positive options. And the 5% at $1 a month, I mean, that's what, a half a cup of coffee, maybe a third if you go to Starbucks. So you can really help move the dial on how our state creates and uses energy for a relatively low cost here. So I don't want to lose sight of that positive impact. Yes, in the back?
I have a procedural question. So you've done this negotiation for a 30-month period. So in 30 months from now, does another letter go out to every single resident with the same options? This is going to be the next lock-in rate. You can either opt out or continue with what you're doing.
The lady asked what happens after 30 months. After 30 months, there will be another competitive bid, and we'll go through this same process where a letter will go out again. It's like it starts the process all over again. So you'll be fully informed, and hopefully by that time the letter isn't 3 pages long.
Yes?
I thought there were 2 questions that frankly the answers were not explicit. One, if I lost my letter and my card, how do I get an opt-out slip?
Okay, the question is, if I've lost my opt-out letter, what do I do? So there's an 800 number on the colored brochure, also on the town website for people viewing this. On the town website, there's a link to the WinPower website, and there's an 800 number that you can call, and they can accomplish the same thing on the phone that the opt-out letter would have, and somebody will walk you through that process. Yes?
And the second one is, John said probably. That's not a good answer. The woman asked whether you could opt in later, and his answer was probably. You don't have to answer today, but I think people want to know that answer precisely.
Well, yes, she can opt in.
Well, she can, but can everybody?
Well,
specialty.
hopefully everybody will understand once the program is up and running, that it's beneficial to the town, it's beneficial to all the residents, and there won't be people opting out. Okay, normally with our programs, we get about 3 to 5% opt-out. A lot of those opt-outs are by mistake, so we certainly allow those people to opt back in.
Yes?
As you mentioned, all this is about supply. On delivery, will this program, the aggregation program, affect any of the items under delivery, even though they sound like they're related to conservation?
The question is, does this program affect anything on your bill besides supply, such as delivery? This only affects supply, period, end of story. All the other parts of your bill are from Eversource, and you might recall they just applied for a big increase to the state, to the same body, the DPU, so that's all Eversource, that's their business. Yes?
You talked a lot about wind power and turbines. Are there any areas in Middlesex County specifically earmarked for turbines?
Great question. I'm the energy coordinator for Winchester and for Woburn, and I can just tell you that by and large, the coast gets great wind. There are some mountains out west that get great wind, but other than that, there's not a lot of opportunity for wind power in our whole area. I felt like, as a Lincoln parent, waiting for my kids outside Lincoln School, we should be able to put a turbine there, but no, it turns out that we do not have enough wind anywhere. There's a tiny little portion of the fells that might possibly, but we would never put a turbine in the fells. So I'm afraid, by and large, it's going to belong to the coast and the mountains.
And how does the bill get for building turbines? How is that?
Why not Mount Pisgah?
Who pays for it?
How do the turbines get built?
Paid for.
How do the turbines get paid for? I'm going to hand that one to Jema.
So basically what happens is there's developers, there's companies who are constantly looking for sites to put new turbines up. So like Susan mentioned, right now they're all along the coast and usually out in the Berkshires or Western Mass. So they are the ones going to pay for the turbine up front. You remember that the graph that I showed you that had that red bar? So they're the ones putting up that cost, and then they're looking, before they build the turbines, for that green contract, for the money they're going to get out of the electricity that they sell. So that was the blue. But they're looking for the electricity money that they're going to get back. They're looking for a contract, and they're also looking for a contract for the RECs, for those renewable energy certificates. Without those two contracts for the electricity and the renewable energy certificates, usually projects don't get financed. So they want to make sure that they have those two contracts ahead of time. So that's where we come in. We tell the developer, if you build it, we will buy the renewable energy certificates. So a lot of those turbines that you saw in our map, for example, Gloucester, Ipswich, Plymouth, all in Massachusetts, we went to the developers, or they came to us before they built them there. If we're going to build a turbine, will you buy the renewable energy credit? Will you sign on with us? And we did. Some of them we did for 5 years, some of them we did for 10 years, so that the bank that they're getting their financing from, they know that no matter what, we're going to pay for that generation and they're going to get that money. So now that, once again, thankfully for programs like yours, we can go to the developers once again. They're the ones putting the money up to build the turbines, they're the ones that own the turbines, but we're getting the power from them, we're buying it from them. So they still own it, but we make sure that the power flows through us.
Yes.
Once the renewable energy projects are complete, paid for, and there's no more costs for the supply line for oil or to run this, will the cost of energy go down?
That's a really interesting question. So the question is, once the turbines are built or the solar panels and they're all bought and paid for, will the cost of energy go down? I think that's a really interesting question. Hang on.
So like I mentioned, wind power, right, onshore wind is the lowest electricity that you can buy from the source. So the hope is that by putting more renewable energy onto the grid, we can make the grid feasible for renewable energy, and then the cost will come down. Because renewable energy is a little bit more predictable than oil or gas prices, right? Because those go up and down with the market all the time, and that's where our price volatility comes from. Renewable energy actually, it flattens the prices a little bit more because we know a little bit what the weather is going to be. We know we're going to get sun in the summer, we're going to get wind in the winter. So by able to put more renewable energy into the grid, it does stabilize the prices a little bit more. And the hope is that by investing more, we can make the technology cheaper, and then the prices will come down too.
I just want to add to that, this is in the fun fact category. By stimulating the wind industry in Massachusetts, there's a blade testing facility in Charlestown. So people come from Europe, people come from all over the world to test their wind turbine blades in Charlestown, Mass. So there are other hidden benefits to us making sure that we stay in this industry, that we continue to support renewables. So, I mean, I just think that's so amazing. We've got, you think of the North Sea as being the home of all the wind in the world, all the wind power, and yet they're coming here because we developed this technology, because Massachusetts is a leader in new technologies. Anyway, so there's hidden benefits to these moves. Okay, yes?
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. 12% to 17% is not a 5% increase, it's probably a 40%.
Yeah, so he's saying that we're not giving ourselves enough credit, that 12% is actually 17%. So the 12% is already built into the Eversource basic rate. So you have never seen that added cost to having 12% from your electricity come from renewable sources. And it's also probably very small because Eversource is probably sourcing it from wherever they can get the cheapest rate. We're telling you that you can get 5% more at a small extra price to get it from Massachusetts, from New England. So yes, the wind power is 17% renewable energy. So again, that does make a lot of big impact when you put it into the scale of New England.
Yes, one question. If I own a house and I sell, if somebody else buys it, do they have an option down the road to come in, or will be a marketing aimed at them, or new construction, turn it over home?
So the question is, what if I sell my house? What happens with the new owner?
On a monthly basis, we get an update from Eversource on all of the new customers that may come into Winchester. What happens for that first month, you get on the basic service of Eversource, and you would go through this same process. A letter goes out to you and says, hey, if you want, you can join the aggregation. That's the way that works.
Part
I'd like you to go over just what is in renewable energy. Like you didn't mention nuclear, and you didn't mention biowaste like wood. I wonder if you could just discuss.
The question is, can we review what is in renewable energy? What are the sources that comprise renewable energy?
So when I talk about renewable energy that we purchase, is Massachusetts Class 1 resources. That's what we're talking about in conjunction with the Renewable Portfolio Standard. So that's going to be wind power, that's going to be solar, so it's going to be small hydro, and when I say small hydro, it's less than 7.5 megawatts of generation. Those are pretty small. There's about, I think there's about 10 or 12 in Massachusetts, maybe. Usually we got large hydro somewhere else. And then we also get biomass, but sorry, not biomass, anaerobic digestion. So that's when we get the methane out of waste from animal farms or also from water treatment plants. That's anaerobic digestion. And then the last one, I'm missing one. Geothermal, thank you. So from all those resources, that's where we're getting the electricity from. Nuclear is not considered renewable energy, even though it has less emissions than fossil fuels. It's not part of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, therefore we do not have any incentives or do not have any contracts with renewable energy. And then biomass, Massachusetts does not have biomass or wood in the Renewable Portfolio Standard for Class 1. I believe they have some for Class 2, which is a completely separate kind of like standard offering that usually you get too. But biomass in Massachusetts is not supported as much. In other states like Maine and New Hampshire, just because they're a little bit more remote areas, they do have biomass as renewable energy. But in Massachusetts, we do not count biomass or wood.
The first of three, you said that you will have all of the things from Massachusetts, and you don't do anything from the ocean.
So there is a bill in the State House that got passed last June to support offshore wind. So the state of Massachusetts has to procure 1,600 megawatt of offshore wind in the next 10 years. What we do at Mass Energy, we support small local projects. So usually 1, 2 turbines. Our biggest project is a 4 turbine project in Plymouth. The answer is no, because those big projects usually go to the utilities. The utilities can help out and get all of that power straight into the basic service. So for example, that offshore wind coming to Massachusetts, National Grid and Eversource will most likely have all of that electricity. For us, we support local projects because they have a harder time acquiring that financing. So for example, for Ipswich, when they were building the turbine, and we actually, our first payment did not go to the developers. It actually went to their bank to pay off their loan, to make sure that they were complacent, that their wind turbine was still being financed and got off the ground. So we support local, small-scale projects in New England, not the offshore.
And the time for this is 30 months. It ends up coming in the middle of winter when the prices are highest. Why is that? Why don't you build something that ends up in the summer all the time?
Most of these programs are started in the fall, and that's why this is a 30-month program, so the renewal will be in the fall. But we can go out to bid for this 9 months ahead of time, depending upon what the market tells us. Our analysts tell us when the market is best to go out for a renewal. So even though it'll start this would start in January, okay, of 2020, okay, the renewal. We can go out to bid 9 months before that if we see the market is good. Okay, so that's the reason for that.
Is that there are no fees attached to the WinPower, and there are no fees attached to Eversource. Other companies who call it dinner time, there are lots of fees attached to those people, and I would encourage you to really be careful if you want to sign up for any of those programs. That's one of the reasons that the town would like to be in the game. But then the other question is, why wouldn't you opt in and opt out all the time if it's for free? John will answer that.
Yeah, no, that really doesn't happen. Again, we have opt-outs of 3 to 5% in our programs. And normally, once people are in the program and they see the advantages of the program, they stay with it, they don't game the system.
Because that's not my question. My question is, can you?
Well, if you personally started coming in and out of the program, I don't think our supplier would be happy with that, and they'd probably cut that off at some point.
So you can't.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. And thank you to WinCam for providing this service to the rest of the family.